Hello, and welcome to our presentation today, part of our series on interest-based problem solving. My name is Jim Coles, and I'm the Executive Director of Columbus Area Labor Management Committee.
And I'm Meredith Porterfield, Program Manager for Columbus Area Labor Management Committee.
The second step in the interest-based process is developing a list of interests. Today we're going to talk about that process, some things you can do to generate a good, complete list of interests, and how you can use those interests then as we continue through this process.
As Jim said, we're focusing on step 2 of the interest-based process, identifying interests. First, the parties will identify their own interests, then they'll go back and identify their common interests or their mutual interests that they share. So just exactly what are interests? Interests are our concerns, our fears, our wants, our desires. It's the why we are trying to solve a particular problem. And that's what is the heart of the interest-based process, is focusing on those whys. We look at the areas that we have in common, such as our common concerns, fears, wants, our common interests. And those interests are driven by our own individual basic needs, such as security, economic well-being, sense of belonging, recognition, and control over one's life. Interests help both sides to win. It also keeps us from reverting back to traditional methods, such as focusing on personalities, placing blame, and also taking positions. But the one thing about interests is they're not always easy to do, or it's not always easy to identify interests, simply because we have to reveal something about ourselves. We might have to be more honest than we did previously. We also might have to have more communication and more information sharing than we did before. But what it can do is to help to build relationships, because we're building trust levels. And we're also creating some win-win solutions, something that both sides or all sides can go back and support. And we start to understand just exactly what's important to everybody. And as you go along through this process, you're going to find out that you're better able to help the other side out just as much as they will be for you.
When your group is ready to identify interests, you're going to need to use a flip chart or a whiteboard or a smartboard in order to record those interests. What we normally do when we work with groups is a round-robin process, in which we'll give each member of the group a chance to identify their interests or what their party's interests might be. We'll take a single piece of flip chart paper, for example. We'll draw a line down the middle of that paper, and one side will have one party's interest, and on the other side we'll record the other party. Once we've done that, then we can go through and identify what the mutual interests are, and we'll circle any interests which are common to both parties. Now, they could be things that are on both lists, but if we go down through and review each interest one by one, we may find that there's things that may not have been on the other list because they just didn't think of them. Or after considering for a while, they decide, yes, this really is our interest. But we're going to ask the parties if they share the interest from the other side. We'll circle it, and that helps us to very clearly see which interests the parties have in common. And in most cases, it's going to be all or nearly all of the interests that are there. Remember that they may not be written exactly the same way, but if the intent is the same, it's a common interest. If it's on one side but not the other, again, that's still fine. I'll give you an example of identifying interest. Suppose we have the members of a family who are trying to decide on how to prioritize their spending decisions. If we ask the members of the family their interest, they might come up with things like maintaining the home, providing the food, safety in the home, or helping others. Each of these would probably be mutual interests for our parties. If we know that we have mutual interests, we have an opportunity to solve problems. In a labor management problem solving, there are still many mutual interests. In traditional problem solving, labor and management focus on where they're apart. But if they think about their interests, they're going to find they have things in common like workplace safety, job security, quality service. All of those things are in common to both labor and management. If we focus on, again, where we're together, the places where those circles overlap, then we've got an opportunity to solve problems. Remember that our interests tell us why solving the problem is important. It's why we're doing this process, why we're spending our time. But it's very important to avoid the temptation when you're listing the interests of jumping to solutions, of somebody trying to say, hey, I know how we could fix this. You can have the time to do that later on, but right now we only want to focus on interests, because knowing our mutual interest creates that common ground as we work through the process. That's it for today. I hope you'll join us in our next program, which will talk about identifying options.